Good morning. Well, it's morning for me. May not be morning for you. May not be morning when I publish this video. But if it is morning, good morning. I thought we would talk a little bit more about Assassin's Creed Shadows and look at this lovely article from my favorite website, my favorite gaming website, The Gamer, who I love everything they write. They are like mini Kotaku with worse writers and even more ideologically strident. So they're super fun. I want to just say real quick about, so obviously this Assassin's Creed Shadows thing is a lot of drama on social media and everywhere. And it's funny because I wrote this tweet saying effectively that I don't really care that Yasuke is one of the main characters in this game. But it is a little weird that they don't just have Japanese characters, like playable characters. The response to this has mostly been a variety of people telling me that they do have. See, there's this one. There's this Japanese woman. Naoe, she's a Japanese character, which yes, she is. But that doesn't matter. I said just Japanese characters. Why do they not just have both these characters be Japanese? But like hundreds of people have responded, there is one. Why are you ignoring the woman, you misogynist? And if I'm not being called a misogynist for apparently ignoring this woman, who I didn't ignore, I just said they should both be Japanese. If I'm not being called misogynist, I'm being called racist in one form or another. Because apparently now, if you want a Japanese game to have Japanese characters, you are racist. The arguments, there's tons of different arguments. A lot of people bring up Neo and the fact that William Adams is a white protagonist in that game. And I say to that, well, it was developed by a Japanese developer, so they're allowed to do whatever they want. I'm not too worried that the Japanese are being racist against themselves. I'm not too worried that they're not, whatever, that was their call. Assassin's Creed is made by non-Japanese people, for the most part. And also just the fact that Neo is a brand new franchise, it was setting its identity up at that point. Whereas Assassin's Creed has been around for a long time and it's gone to a lot of different locations. And this is the first time we've ever had Japan as one of those locations. And the first time we've ever had Japanese characters that we can play in a game, in a Assassin's Creed game. So it's weird that one of the two playable characters isn't Japanese. That's just weird. Is it a big deal? I don't really think so. But I thought it was worth noting that it was a little odd. And the only reason I commented on it in the first place is because it was in a response to somebody calling everyone who thought this was bad or didn't like this a racist. And that really bugs me because it's just like, it's so crazy to me that that's your default card that you play. Oh, you don't like this choice? You have to be racist. There can be no other reason. And it's strange also because so many of the people playing the race card say that somehow it's just a bunch of white people wanting white people to be in the game. Where I've never seen one single person say that they want one of these assassins to be white. They want them to be Japanese. Anyways, so there's this article by Jade King in The Gamer. Assassin's Creed doesn't care about historical accuracy, and neither should you. Now, of course, there's been a huge debate on the historical accuracy of, a lot of people have also said, he's a historically accurate character. Why are you freaking out about this? Well, first of all, I'm not freaking out. And second of all, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if the character is historically accurate. In fact, there's never been a main playable protagonist in Assassin's Creed who is a historically accurate character. They've all been fictional characters, and that's the way it should be. That's the way it's always been in this franchise, and I'm not really sure why they're changing that now. So do I care about historical accuracy? No. Do I care if Yasuke was a samurai or a retainer or any of that shit? No, I don't. I think that the one of the great things about Yasuke is that he has almost no historical. There's almost nothing about him in the record, right? We know he existed. We know about when he was around and who he hung out with, but we don't really know much about him beyond that. And So he's a great character because he's a blank slate, and for a game, it makes a lot of sense to use him. I don't think it makes a lot of sense in Assassin's Creed, but I think that he's a great character. And that there's a reason that there's so many legends, and that those have been turned into anime and other stories about this character because he is a blank slate and you can do anything you want with him. So debating whether he was a samurai or not, debating all these little finer points, we really don't have enough information, and it really doesn't matter. Anyways, let's read this article. Like a fly to excrement, certain corners of the internet have predictably jumped onto Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Shadows and immediately labeled it as woke for featuring a black man and a Japanese woman as the two lead characters. See how they're already making it sound like people have a huge problem with a Japanese woman as one of the lead characters. From what I've seen, and I'm sure there are people who don't like this, but from what I've seen, that is not even an issue at all. The bulk of this debate is people saying that both characters should be Japanese, not that there shouldn't be a female character. There have been other female assassins. If you go back to, I believe it was Syndicate, there was a female assassin. I'm sure there haven't been as many, but I don't think that is really, this is just a straw man. Many circles believe that Shadows is dishonoring the franchise by resorting to historically inaccurate stories, despite the fact that Yasuke is a real historical figure. Nobody is actually saying that. None of the Assassin's Creed games are like historically accurate stories. They are set in historically semi-accurate times and places and deal with events that have some historical accuracy to them. But this whole franchise is built on this long-running war between the Assassins and the Templar that is totally fictional. Nobody is saying that it has to be historically accurate. They're just, yeah, so. And it's the same series where you can duke it out with the Pope, fight mythical creatures, and travel to the lost city of Atlantis. Although a lot of that stuff is actually in, like, separate DLC, cordoned off from the main stories, but whatever. And then, my favorite word, grifters. This is always, there are grifters. I think there are grifters on both sides of the culture war, because there's a buck to be made, there's going to be grifters. But a lot of people love to just toss this word around because I guess it's a word of power. Grifters spouting thinly veiled racism are trying to act like they care about Assassin's Creed or the historical setting it seeks to depict in order to justify their own prejudices, screaming loudly inside echo chambers which are designed to make people angry over nothing before they move on to the next thing. It happened with Stellar Blade, and like I expected, seconds after key art of Shadows leaked and teased a man of color as the main character, the same has happened here. Sorry, I'm really hamming it up, aren't I? Okay, let's break that down a little bit. So, apparently racist people, who are also grifters, are pretending to be mad in their echo chambers because the main character is a person of color. And I said this on Twitter, is the gamer actually saying that a Japanese man is not a person of color? Are Japanese people, are Asian people now no longer considered, are they just considered white now? I'm confused. I thought that if you were Japanese or Korean or Chinese, that you are a person of color. Does that only apply to black people now? Does that apply to Native American people or Hispanic people? Or I'm concerned that they've created this hierarchy of concern, a hierarchy of like who is the most protected or the most who is the biggest victim that these white people are going to go white knight for, and it's black people. Obviously, they are condescending. I just find it so condescending and honestly pretty racist to have this white woman basically saying that a Japanese man doesn't count, and that racism only counts towards black people, black men, and that's just that's crazy to me. My brother and sister are both Korean, by the way, so I might be a little sensitive to this, but I've seen lots and lots of racism directed at them over the years, and that's certainly shaped my worldview about, the problems with racism, the very real reality that people go through, including Asian people, by the way. And I guess it's very in vogue to like discount that group of people from the spectrum of racism, but they are, it's clear here to me that a lot of people are now saying that it's okay to replace a Japanese person in this game with a black person because they're black. Now, what if this samurai had been a white person? Would they still be defending that? Probably not. What if this game took place in Ethiopia or Zimbabwe, Would they still be defending if one of the two black protagonists was replaced with an Asian or a white person? No, probably not. Assassin's Creed has always put you in the shoes of outsiders and rebels from all walks of life, and has long since moved on from being so firmly grounded in realism. It's not that kind of experience, and can't suddenly be perceived as one to justify bigotry. I don't think this is about realism. I think that, at least in my opinion, it's just about, this is the first game we've had in Japan. Why aren't we just playing as Japanese characters? Not because of realism, but because literally this is the only Assassin's Creed game that has ever gone to Japan, and the only mainline one that has gone to Asia at all, outside of, depending on what you consider Asia. There's obviously Middle Eastern games, and then there's been the side-scrolling games that have taken place in China and India and whatnot, and Russia. But those were not mainline games. They were side-scrollers. The discourse surrounding shadows on social media has already reached awful levels. Awful levels. And it has only been revealed for a day. People of color responding to official channels to express their excitement are being met with blatant racism, bigoted memes, and trolls, claiming black people are only excited about Assassin's Creed Shadows because they can play as one of their own, like people of color haven't played a role in mainstream games for decades now. What is the point of this? Okay, so this is the most incoherent paragraph. Apparently, again, this just discounts, are Asian people not people of color? So it's just black people now that are considered that. Okay, all right. You learn something new every day. Much of the outrage appears to stem from the fact that Yasuke the samurai is not just an apparent source of historical inaccuracy. He was a retainer, a different class of samurai that still played a similar role. We don't know what the fuck. But represents Ubisoft once again trying to push its political agenda into a series that should have no business discussing such things. Yeah, obviously. That is exactly what Ubisoft is doing, and that's why people are upset. Again, I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I think we could happily ignore the whole thing. But it's arrogant assholery like this article that compels me to comment on it. I can't help myself. I am compelled to rebuke this bullshit. Now, yeah, there are racists out there. There are people who are just mad because he's black. They would be mad in any context. But I think that this is just so overblown. Like, the actual number of people. Like, there is this whole segment, small, I will say, a small segment of people online who think that there are just virulent racists everywhere. And that's simply not true. Just like I don't think there's that many of the social justice warrior woke types. And frankly, like, virulent racists are the worst type of people, right? But the nasty, like, holier than thou social justice crew is like just one step less nasty. These are the most unpleasant, unlikable, unrelatable people in the world. And they're pushing a deeply unpopular brand of identity politics that most people do not like, including most very moderate people. People like me, who aren't like right-wingers. We still don't like this kind of identity politics. It's exclusionary. It's for people who constantly beat the drums of diversity and inclusion, these are like the least tolerant, least inclusive people in the world. Well, maybe not the most, but they're way up there. They spout their own brand of racism and sexism, and this is not a winning politics, and it's bizarre to me how much voice and how much momentum it's gained in the last few years, but it's only in this cloistered online setting or in universities or in certain corporate settings. It doesn't exist in the wild. It's just not real. It's a fantasy perpetuated by basically children. These are children with infantile ways of thinking about the world who have no experience dealing with actual people in the world. But it's so easy just to bandy about terms like racist, just to write articles like this that are just nothing burgers. There's nothing here. It's an empty social signaling bullshit rhetoric. Anyways, blah, blah, blah. I'm just ranting. There's all these notes in here. What do they say? So this first note, Ghost of Tsushima features a Japanese protagonist, but it's not historically accurate. It has you wielding katanas for the majority of the game, despite the fact they weren't invented until after the time period in which it is set. Yeah, nobody gives a shit. Literally, the idea isn't that these games have to be perfectly historically accurate. It's that that you're trying to like represent the place and the time and the spirit of that time as with some, not accuracy, but in the mold, in the spirit of that. So people are like, why aren't you mad at Edward Kenway in Black Flag? And it's like, well, because it was the golden age of piracy. That's what that game was about. And a lot of the pirates were English and Spanish, right? Like, this is like a proxy war between these two naval powers. And yeah, the Caribbean had a lot of different races. And that's why actually the Freedom Cry DLC, which was released as a standalone game, features a black assassin. A playable assassin who is black. And actually, Assassin's Creed historically has had lots of different nationalities represented. Bayek is not white. Connor was not white, and so on and so forth. And nobody has actually thrown a fit about this ever before. I really do think that while there may be racists involved in this conversation, the reality is most people are just saying, I don't get it. Why aren't we just playing Japanese characters? This is the first time we've gone to Japan. Yasuke would have been an awesome, actually, like DLC character, or in another game set in Japan, the second game, I don't know, whatever. Again, I just don't really care. What I care more about is the commentary around this, and just this desperate race to the bottom to just call everybody out as an awful person. This culture war, it's just exhausting. Blah blah blah. Assassin's Creed is no stranger to depicting major and oftentimes controversial historical figures in a strange light, often treating them as MCU-esque cameos, where they appear to help our heroes on a mission or sometimes fold into the main narrative in significant ways. Margaret Thatcher is canonically a Templar, for instance. Shadows is not claiming to change the history it depicts or make it more progressive to placate modern audiences. It is simply doing what Assassin's Creed has always done. But it's not, because no Assassin's Creed game has ever had a playable historical figure before. Not main character anyways. They've all been fictional. So it is doing something that has never been done in an Assassin's Creed before. Yasuke has been featured in countless books, films, shows, anime, and myriad other media over the years, but only in a mainstream video game does his presence spark such outrage. Actually, I don't think if they made a Yasuke video game, anyone would have batted an eye. This is not the issue. You are bullshitting us. It says a lot about how toxic and guarded the medium has grown that something as trivial as this is being heralded as yet another means for outrage. No, it doesn't. Yasuke is a famous retainer who has slowly but surely morphed into legend, his past just mysterious enough for creatives to bend his story in bold, fascinating ways. Ubisoft will no doubt follow this trajectory in shadows, mixing fact with fiction, while taking all the usual liberties. Yeah, I mean, you're just saying things that are true, and that don't matter, as beside the point. And then they talk about other games. I'm not going to keep reading like that. It's not dissimilar to how Like a Dragon Ishin took the famous story of Sakamoto Ryoma and brought him back to life in the form of beloved protagonist Kazuma Kiryu. It bends the truth in favor of spectacle while always paying homage and respect to parts of this history considered sacred. Yasuke is in the same ballpark. He just happens to be black instead of Japanese, and thus he doesn't belong, ingrained prejudice seeping into Shadow's identity before we've even seen a sliver of gameplay. No, it's not because he's black. That again, it's such a red herring. Is a red herring the right one? It's because he's not Japanese. It's not because he's black. If he was any other race and not Japanese, I think it would still be the same problem. Blah blah blah. Blah 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 blah. I'm not Japanese, so I can't speak about the importance of properly depicting its history and well-renowned figures about it, but I can point to the praise that Japanese developers or players had for Ghost of Tsushima, which had a Japanese protagonist, guys, or previous depictions of Yasuke in other media made by Japan. Yes, there's no problem with... Japanese people don't have a problem with Yasuke. That's not the point. The point is not that. You keep missing the point, and I think it's on purpose. La la la. Certain groups are beating this drum as it fits perfectly within our modern definition of outrage politics, giving them another punching bag to hold over anyone they disagree with while claiming to fight for the freedom of expression that video games provide, so long as that expression aligns with their own ideology. And of course, the lack of self-awareness in this paragraph is phenomenal. Like, certain groups, yeah, you're part of that. You are part of this outrage politics. It's your group, your ideology that's aligning with what you're saying right now. Obviously. It's the same cyclical turn of events that happens constantly in the current climate as we enter a new period of discourse where it grows harder and harder for people of color, women, LGBTQ plus individuals, and any minority, except for the Japanese apparently, to be a big part of the video game landscape without being subject to hatred. It's exhausting. Oh, as a white woman, it's just so exhausting. And only gets worse, but you'd expect the controversy around Assassin's Creed Shadows to have at least some substance. It doesn't. It will be yet another Ubisoft open-world game that plays fast and loose in an historical period where you'll fight everything from lowly soldiers to massive monsters. The end. I fail to understand the point of this article. It's a lot of hemming and hawing. Words. So yeah, anyways, I think this debate is pretty dumb. I really think the debate over whether Yasuke was a samurai or a retainer or a toothbrush or a pickle, it just doesn't matter. It's a game. I don't think it's a big deal that he's one of the protagonists in this game. I think the commentary around all of it is what is bothersome. The fact that you can't even just say, I mean, literally, my tweet, and my tweet was so milquetoast and bland. I mean, I just said, isn't it a little weird? It's just a little weird. Like, I'm not saying like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Ubisoft is trying to brainwash us. Like, whatever. This is in everything these days, right? The pushing, yes, they're absolutely pushing political ideology. Can I easily ignore it? Yes. In a game like this, I'm sure I can, because it's mostly going to be nothing to do with that. It's just a representation, right? No big deal. Whatever. I think it's much more interesting to play a game like Tales of Kenzera Zhao from Abubakar Salim, who was the voice actor behind Bayek, which takes place in Africa and which deals with African folklore and art and legend and all of that stuff and is very, very African. And I think that game is great just the way it is. And I think that if they made the main character of that game not African, that would be weird. And I think that's the point, is that sometimes sometimes diversity needs to be about different cultures and their stories, purely that. Like tell us that story. Let's see what that's all about. And I don't want it to be just like, I mean, you look at like the percentage of America's a very diverse country, but it's still like 11% of people here are black, right? In Japan, when Yasuke was around, I don't think he was the only black person in Japan, but he was one of the only black people. And, so like having him be 50% of the playable characters in the game feels like overrepresentation of a different culture in a game that is the first one in the series to go to Japan. Why is Neo different? Well, it's a totally different franchise. It's a brand new franchise when that was created, and Japanese people picked the protagonist. I think if that's what the Japanese want to do with their games, that's what they should be able to do. And something like Shogun, right? That has Blackthorn. He's a white guy. Yeah, but it's based on a book. Like, it's not a new game that's based on nothing. It's based on a book, which is based on the history of William Adams, and his, and there was lots of criticism of the decision to use that particular book as the inspiration for that show. Like, why not pick just a show that's more purely Japanese? Why have it be Shogun? A lot of people. I read a lot of people saying this is an odd choice, and why do we need another, show about a white dude going to Japan when we could just have a show about Japanese politics? I think that's very valid criticism, honestly. I think they did a great job with it. I think that the casting for both the Japanese and non-Japanese actors in that show was great. And Cosmo Jarvis did a great job as Blackthorn. But I think it's valid criticism to say, well, maybe it would have been better just to have a show about Japanese people, Japanese history without, one of the main characters being European. Do we really need that? I don't know. Maybe it does help the audience on that journey, to follow into that culture, follow that more familiar Western, newcomer, the stranger in a strange land. Maybe it helps. Maybe there's value to that type of storytelling. Maybe that value has played out. I don't know. And that's, I know that's one of the reasons that Ubisoft says they've picked Yasuke, is that he's a stranger in a strange land. You follow him into Japan to learn about that culture with him. That's a valid reason. I get that. So I think more so than this actual game, it's the way that we are now handling these controversies as people and how we treat people when we handle these controversies. Just the instant reaction to just label everyone as racist, or to label everyone as, as woke or whatever. Like, people are more complicated generally than these groups that we put, these boxes we put groups into, right? And that to me is what's exhausting. Not this gamer bullshit. The gamer bullshit. Anyways, okay, I've rambled long enough. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And I have other things to talk about. I'm going to probably be done with Assassin's Creed Shadows for now. All right, peace.